My Govanen. Welcome to the Tolkien Lore Channel. I'm the Tolkien Geek, and this is the second in my video series debunking the CinemaSins Everything Wrong With the Lord of the Rings videos. So this being part 2, this will of course be focused on the Two Towers. If you haven't already seen the one where I debunked the Fellowship of the Ring video, I'll link to that in the description so you can find that, and I'll also link to the Return of the King once I've got that one up as well. Without further ado, let's get started.
He hates them.
I know Gollum's not exactly smart, but why would he talk so loudly to himself if he's trying to actually sneak up on the hobbits and surprise them?
Well, for one thing, Gollum is kind of compulsively addicted to the ring and constantly talks to himself without really seeming to have any control over it. Second, you'd be surprised what people will sleep through when they're tired. I've slept through some stuff that I never thought I would sleep through, and I'm a light sleeper. So, 2 reasons why this criticism is bad.
Sam is addicted to golems.
Okay, so Peter Jackson does kind of overplay this scene because here Sam takes his venom out a little more strongly than he ever does in the novel, but it is pretty accurate that Sam has a very strong dislike of Gollum, partially because Gollum did just attack them in the night, tried to kill Frodo, and that's kind of Sam's biggest thing is protecting Frodo, so it kind of makes sense that he would hate Gollum.
No one's gonna save you now.
There is no way that one of the riders of Rohan was able to throw his spear from this distance to kill a crouching orc.
And we know how far the riders were. How? The first time we see them approach from the gloom, they're already pretty close, and you can't see them beyond that. We actually see when they come into view, so it's not like they're that far away. Also, if they were so worried about the physics of javelin throwing, you'd think they would bring up the same exact thing in The Return of the King, where Éomer chucks a spear at one of the Haradrim riding on an Oliphant, but guess what? They don't.
Make it look like the character died when 90% of the audience knows he didn't die cliché.
I'd venture to guess that more than 90% is a pretty high estimate, since probably a lot of people who saw the movies never actually read the books and didn't really know how the story ended. And since we already had one major character, Boromir, die off, it's not impossible that another one would. That said, this scene does build tension, so even if you know with some degree of certainty that Pippin's not going to die, the scene does also help to kind of create a little bit more cinematic tension in the scene, so I really don't see why this is a problem.
The red sun rises. Blood has been spilled this night.
Is Legolas serious? So every time blood spills, a red sun rises? So there should be a red sun for like at least half the trilogy, right?
Considering the fact that we see almost no sunrises throughout the course of the movie, this isn't a problem.
I would cut off your head, dwarf, if it stood but a little higher from the ground.
You would die before your stroke fell.
I know we need to establish that Legolas has become a blood brother to Gimli, but this is way out of line for his character, and stupid. I mean, is this Legolas Skywalker?
Why is this out of character for Legolas? How much of Legolas's character do we actually know from the movie? Very little, but the one thing that we do know for sure from the Fellowship of the Ring is that he established a very fast friendship with Gimli. By the way, this is exactly what he does in the novel, and I think Tolkien has a better idea of what Legolas's character is than CinemaSins.
We are no spies.
The first clue should have been when we hailed you while your backs were turned and we had no reason to give away our position.
Here again, the movie actually follows the book pretty closely because Éomer does suspect them of being spies in the novel. But why would that be the case? Well, Grima Wormtongue made it directly into Theoden's court in the open as a, not exactly a spy, but the same idea. So is it really impossible that because they revealed themselves openly that they can't be spies? Not really.
We left none alive.
Instead of asking the riders if they remember killing people as memorable as hobbits, or if they even remember stacking 2 small childlike creatures who don't look one bit like orcs on the death pile, Éomer chooses the all I remember is that everybody died story to keep us in quote-unquote suspense.
Oh my gosh, Gimli literally says, "Did you see 2 hobbits with them? Did you not watch that part of the movie?"
In 5 seconds, Gimli finds a hobbit belt in an orc stack.
This one is kind of like the whole, they got through Moria in 2 hours in the first movie. So again, this one is a little bit montagey. You can tell that they're not showing just a progressive linear chronology of how they get there. They kind of skip a little bit, so we don't really know exactly how long Gimli's been searching through that pile of dead orcs. So 5 seconds is just a random thrown out number that they put in because they don't want to take the time to realize that we kind of skipping time here.
I agree that Aragorn is this badass ranger dude, but the Hobbit's tracks should have long been trampled over by horses and men dragging dead orcs to the flaming Death Mountain.
Okay, I'd be willing to give CinemaSins a smidge of credit here. Because if I remember correctly, in the novel, they actually do have to kind of broaden the area that they're searching a little bit in the novel to find any signs that Merry and Pippin survive. So Peter Jackson is kind of doing the same thing, but just not taking them very far from the mound. That said, it's still possible that because of where Merry and Pippin were at the time that the riders attacked, which was kind of far from the rest of the orcs, that they wouldn't be completely, their tracks wouldn't be completely trampled over by the horses, and there's no reason why orcs should have been dragged over that spot, since, again, they were already pretty far from where all the orcs were.
First off, the Nazgul really need to stop shrieking and giving away their position. Secondly, you tracked Frodo to the marshes and once again can't locate the ring mere feet in front of you.
Okay, second problem first. Who says they tracked Frodo anywhere? Who says they're looking for Frodo at this point? That's not the only thing the Nazgul do. I realize it's not as clear in the movies, but in the books at least, it's rather explicit that a lot of what the Nazgul do is connected with Saruman, and Sauron's dealing with him, and of course in Return of the King, they're actively involved in the battles and stuff. So we don't really know that they're tracking Frodo at this point, and there's no reason to think per se that they are. Therefore, the first criticism, that the Nazgul are shrieking and giving away their position, is kind of nonsensical, because if they're not trying to hide and track Frodo, then it really doesn't matter.
Also, a closed fist is enough to quiet a powerful magical evil ring.
Yes. Yes, it does. Love conquers all.
How the hell does this actually work? How did they not see them?
Again, if you would watch literally the next 5 seconds of the movie, you would see that the cloak was covered with a bunch of dust and stones, making it look like they were actually a rock. Hard to believe it was actually happened that way, but if you watch the movie, this is explained.
I guess Gandalf used a Jedi mind trick of some sort to make this guy forget that he was a wizard and that the walking stick was a magical staff.
Actually, it's pretty clear here that Hama is conflicted, and therefore we can assume that he does know that Gandalf is a wizard and that his staff may or may not be useful for such things. But even beyond that, this is also true to the book again, because in the book there's a little more extended conversation where Hama basically explicitly gives his rationale, which is, yes, that could be a weapon in the hands of a wizard, but I trust you, so I'm going to let you in anyway.
Gandalf clearly walks into the hall with his staff out in the open, and it's not entirely hidden as he continues to walk towards the king, but nonetheless it's a total surprise to Grima when Gandalf exposes his staff to show he means business.
Here again, CinemaSins has to skip over some stuff to make their point. First of all, the hall is dark, dimly lit, but more importantly, if you watch the scene carefully from beginning to end, you'll notice that Gandalf is holding his staff at such an angle that when viewed from Grima's position, you can really just see the tip. He's holding it in such a way that it's essentially dead even with Grima's eyesight, so he wouldn't really notice it, in fact.
Told you to take the wizard's staff!
Is the staff the sole source of Gandalf's power? Didn't he lose the staff and fall with the Balrog for days and days and fight that demon with a sword?
CinemaSins should really make up its mind which approach it wants to take. Is Hama an idiot for letting Gandalf in with a staff because he's a wizard? Or is Gandalf with a staff not really substantially different than Gandalf without a staff? You gotta pick one or the other. But regardless, for this particular criticism, no, it's not the sole source of Gandalf's power. We don't really know exactly to what degree the staff enhances or enables Gandalf to use magic at all. But presumably, in the context of the story, where the staff is presumed to be at least some part of his ability to wield magic by everybody else, even though we don't know that, it would be perfectly rational for Wormtongue to think, oh, he has a staff, we're in more trouble than we thought, because he can do more magic.
Enough blood has been spilled on his account.
I agree with the merciful Aragorn here. You shouldn't just go around killing dudes, but why should he be let go? Also, they didn't have to give him a f***ing horse, did they?
So, they half agree with Aragorn. They don't actually completely agree with Aragorn, because Aragorn says let him go, and they say, why should you let him go? And I would agree here that seems kind of stupid in the context of the movie. The novel handles this much better. Gandalf basically tells Theoden, you can't really trust this guy, so what I would do if I were you is give him the choice of what he wants to do. He can ride with you to war, or he can go wherever he wants, and by his choice you will know exactly who Grima Wormtongue is. Wormtongue, of course, chooses to get the heck out of Dodge.
You have 2,000 good men riding north as we speak.
Does this look like 2,000 men? Where did Aragorn learn to count?
Is it just maybe possible that there were more riders than we saw on the screen? Just maybe?
When last I looked, Theoden, not Aragorn, was king of Rohan.
Yeah, well, last I looked, Theoden got his f***ing kingly mind all invaded by the evil sorcerer and shit, so maybe shut your pie hole and let someone who hasn't f***ed up lately do the planning.
This is classic CinemaSins, pointing out a flaw that isn't actually there in favor of, well, rather than pointing out the flaw that really is there. They completely miss the fact that what does it matter if you want to avoid open war if Saruman is invading your country? That's by definition open war, and that's what Aragorn is saying. It's too late. But beyond that, their own criticism is a problem because he's no longer possessed, so that's no longer an issue. So what difference does that make?
I realize marching to Mordor must be brutally boring, but none of these soldiers looks up to see the not really even hiding hobbits?
I'm pretty sure even the guys at CinemaSins would not notice two small hobbits 200 yards away in a bunch of brush.
Most useless love triangle in the history of plot.
Okay, so the fact that it's a triangle is kind of useless because Aragorn having any kind of feelings for Éowyn doesn't really make any sense, given that he's really in love with Arwen. Is kind of dumb in the movie. In the novel, it makes a lot more sense because there, Aragorn recognizes that Éowyn is a good person and she has her own qualities, but he never, he's never considering the possibility of marrying her as opposed to Arwen. But Éowyn's love for Aragorn actually does serve a purpose later in the plot where she ends up falling for Faramir. So, yeah, the movie version of how this plays out doesn't really work that well, so I'll give him some credit here.
I'm pretty sure Legolas can shoot arrows faster than this, but I guess we need more time to get acquainted with the wargs. Did
anybody else note that this scene is being filmed in slow motion?
Who the f*** is that? That is not Gimli.
He's also not on Legolas's horse. Anybody who's ever seen two people ride horseback on the same horse knows that there's no way you could get that far behind the front rider and still be on the horse and not fall off the rump. It's not going to happen. If you actually look closely, you can see Gimli's arm around Legolas's torso because that's how you ride with two people on one horse. That's just not paying attention.
Even in Middle-earth, horrible creatures bent on death would rather bark at you than try and kill you first.
Even in the real world, wolves and dogs tend to size you up and growl at you before immediately jumping for the attack. So this is not really that weird.
For the third time in the series, and the second time in this movie, yet another character supposedly dies when we know full well he doesn't.
Okay, I'll totally give it to CinemaSins on this one, because Aragorn going over the cliff here is pointless, adds nothing to the plot, doesn't really increase the tension. All it does is maybe make you think that Aragorn's dead if you have never read the novel and don't have any clue where this is going. And even then, it's highly unlikely that you would reach that conclusion. So, yeah, this was a really stupid move on Peter Jackson's part. The only thing it brings into the movie is his little throwback scene where he sees Arwen and the fact that he then sees the orc army coming his way. The Arwen thing is completely outside the realm of what we need to see in the movie. He just added that in to have some kind of romantic subplot so that he could triangle off of Éowyn or whatever. And then the orcs, the Uruk-hai coming, they get warned of that by somebody who escaped the Battle of the Fords of Isen. So that was handled much more neatly in the novel anyway. So yeah, this is legitimately a bad idea on Peter Jackson's part.
Tens of thousands.
But my lord, there is no such force.
This is a great reveal for the audience, but you can't seriously be expecting me to believe that Wormtongue either lives in this tower or comes here every morning for work and has no idea there are tens of thousands of soldiers outside.
Why would you think that Grima Wormtongue either lives in the tower or comes to work every morning there? That doesn't make any sense because his entire role is to be a counselor to King Theoden, and so he has to stay in Theoden's court all the time. Second, we know that there's tons of pits under the ground in Orthanc, and so the idea that he would just automatically know that everything that's going on is, well, not really evidenced by the movie.
He no longer cares for growing things.
Did this movie just turn into Fern Gully?
Let me tell you something, youngster. Tolkien loved trees long before anybody came up with Fern Gully, or Dancing with Wolves, or Pocahontas, or what's the other one? Oh, yeah, Avatar. Any of those things. Tolkien predates all of them, and he has a much less hippie reason for liking trees.
It would grieve you, then, to learn that he is dead.
How does word travel fast enough for Faramir to know that Boromir died alone in the forest, but not fast enough for that message to also contain the words, by the way, don't kill or capture the 2 ring-bearing hobbits that were friends of your dead brother Boromir?
Okay, this marks at least the second time in this video where CinemaSins apparently came up with their criticism before watching the completion of the scene, because in the next 30 to 60 seconds, Frodo asks Faramir, if something's happened to Boromir, we would have you tell us. Faramir says, his horn washed up on the bank, and I know it in my heart that he's dead because he's my brother. And then, and this might only be in the extended version, it shows us Faramir seeing Boromir float by on the boat that Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas put him in. Even if that's only in the extended version, the original theatrical cut still has enough information there to show why Faramir would know that Boromir's dead without having any indication who he was traveling with, why he was traveling with them, or what happened to him.
Who enter the Forbidden Pool bears the penalty of death.
The Forbidden Pool? Are you making this up as you go along?
No, he's actually not just making it up as he goes along, although here again is an area where the movie leaves out a little information that would be helpful from the novel. In the novel, it's explained that where the men of Gondor are at right now is a hidden sanctuary, and basically the reason that they kill anybody that comes there is to make sure that they're never discovered. So it's not just a forbidden pool, which that's kind of the way it makes it sound in the movie. So I'll give them partial credit for the idea that there's not enough information to explain it, but it's not hard really to understand why there might be some reason for, killing people who are this near their hiding place, even without that knowledge from the novel.
Wait, didn't we just see them do this already? I mean, I know Aragorn said hold after the old dude accidentally shot his arrow, but does hold mean don't fire? Or does it mean everyone put your bows down completely so that I need to give you an entirely separate command in order for you to raise them again?
If you actually go and watch the full scene, you'll never see an elf draw their bow up until this point. So when Aragorn tells them to draw and prepare to fire, that is the first time the elves did that.
He's just now telling them this.
We don't actually know how much time passes between when the elves from Lothlorien arrive and when they actually get up on the battlements to get ready for the attack, so it's not clear that Legolas would have had time to tell everybody this. Although, granted, it seems like he would have had time to mention it while they were all just kind of sitting up there, so, again, partial credit.
The Ents take forever to do anything. Why? Because the story's not ready for them yet, but it doesn't want you being all surprised when they show up later.
Again, this actually follows the novel kind of closely. In the novel, though, they actually get started with the Entmoot like a couple of days before the Battle of Helm's Deep, and they actually decide to go to get involved in the war. And so in the movie, it does kind of truncate that and make it seem a little odd, but it is in keeping with the novel in the sense that the Ents really are slow to do or decide anything. So no, it's not just a plot device in the movie. It's sticking to, more or less, the original characters as made by Tolkien himself. So you can't really peg this one on the movie.
Worth taking a long time to say.
Okay, so speak English then. All the Ents nodded when you made that "you aren't orcs" proclamation, so all of you understood that.
All the Ents we could see nodded. Not all the Ents actually understood the common speech, believe it or not.
You had one job, Legolas. One job.
Okay, here they get credit again, because obviously every other time Legolas fires a bow, he kills somebody in one shot. Here he gets 2 shots and can't manage to kill the Uruk-hai with no armor. By the way, they also miss the fact that despite being some distance, whenever the arrows actually hit the Uruk-hai in the shoulder, it's almost totally vertical. And so how does that happen even just in terms of physics? It doesn't make any sense. They totally overlooked that part, which I thought was interesting.
No one could possibly fall for the Aragorn might be dead routine at this point, but the movie keeps wasting time on it.
Maybe this is just because I'd already read the novels and knew, of course, that Aragorn didn't die, but I didn't get a Aragorn might be dead vibe from this scene. So I'm not sure where they're getting this, and at any rate, it creates some tension because it shows Aragorn being at least helpless momentarily while the Uruk-hai have a chance to pour in through the breach in the wall. So there's a purpose for why they did this cinematically, and it's not just, oh, Aragorn might be dead.
How does Treebird not know this? Don't the trees talk to each other? Wouldn't the Ents have gotten word that this was happening?
Full credit here again. This is where Peter Jackson really takes a departure from the novel, because in the novel, the Ents did know about this, and that's why they did decide to get involved in the war and marched to Orthanc. So this idea that the Ents, and Treebeard in particular, wouldn't know about this is pretty silly, because Saruman's been going around chopping down trees for quite a while at this point. So yeah, they get credit for this one for sure. It's one of the areas where I have a really big issue with the way Peter Jackson did this movie.
Well, here we are at Helm's Deep the next morning. Where's that red sun that signals the blood spilling that Legolas was talking about?
If you keep watching the movie, you will see that when the sun comes up, it has to come over a rather large ridge. That's where Gandalf and the riders come over at the very end and rout the Uruk-hai. And so by that point, the sun has to be pretty high in the sky, at which point there is no way it could be red. So there's a perfectly good explanation right there. Okay, so that'll do it for my takedown of CinemaSins' Everything Wrong with the Two Towers. Boy, that was even worse than the first one. And Return of the King doesn't get much better. There's a lot of repeat material in Return of the King too, so I'll be able to skip some of that. But for now, that's the Two Towers takedown, and I will see you in the third video. If you like this video, or you want to learn anything more about Tolkien and the worlds he created, or even non-Middle-earth related things about Tolkien, please subscribe to the channel. Please give the video a like and share it around. And you can also follow me on Twitter at JRRTLore. Until next time, I'm the Tolkien Geek signing out for the Tolkien Lore channel. Namarie.